Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Five-1 Speedway show. The last episode was a good one. If you've missed it, it is now live and everything on YouTube, on all the podcasts and everything. It was with Louis Kerr, the last one. It was very good to hear his insight on his 2019 campaign, his comeback year, and also the few meetings he rode in 2020. But now we're moving away from a rider to a promoter, team manager, editor, and everything. I think he's done everything in Speedway apart from ride Speedway. So this guy was also the personal manager of the 6 times World Speedway champion Ivan Mauger. So I'm sure we'll get to hear some great stories about that tonight, as well as being promoter at several clubs and team managing several clubs to glory during his time in the sport. Please welcome to the show, Peter Oakes.
Hi Neil, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good, mate. Just plodding along in these weird and difficult times. But so how are you anyway? How's 2020 been for yourself?
Oh, it's been relatively busy, strangely enough. Fortunately, touch wood, I haven't really been affected by COVID, but obviously my age and my wife Pam's sort of disablement, then we've had to be very careful, and we've had the long periods of lockdown and shielding, but back in it now, we're just looking forward and hopefully waiting for that call to have the vaccine, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not too far around the corner, from having it, and then obviously then hopefully we get back to some sort of normality, and then fingers crossed to maybe sort of April, May time to tapes up for a new season.
Yeah, I would have thought we're looking at May as the earliest. Mm-hmm. If you listen to what the government are saying at the moment, isn't it? That I think any thoughts of it being March, early April, I think they've probably already gone out of the window, but we'll see. Let's hope I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, you never know. Fingers crossed, mate. Fingers crossed. But yeah, with all these new government guidelines, looking at sort of March time, that a lot of it will be lifted. It does really put pace to a normal start of the season. We're looking sort of like a more Swedish/Polish sort of start to the season, May time. So, but yeah, fingers crossed. Did you manage to get to go to any of the few meetings that was on in 2020?
No, I didn't. For the first time, believe it or not, since 1958. I never went to a live Speedway meeting.
Whoa.
It was a bit strange.
Yeah, I can imagine it was, because we usually see you at the pits, with your notepad and everyone talking to everyone around the pits and everything. So, but, did you manage to watch it all on all the Grand Prix and things like that on TV? Then
I've watched all the Grand Prix and a little bit of Sweden, a little bit of Poland. I didn't watch the live streaming from the UK for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. Nothing untoward. It just didn't fit in with my own plans. But it's certainly very, very hard. I've never known a year like it.
Yeah, I think the only thing you could sort of really compare it to is the war days, things like that, with only
No,
I don't say that. I wasn't saying that. No, but I was just saying, like, this sort of period in Speedway and British League anyway, sort of that sort of reminiscence of that sort of time, really, because only Bellevue ran, and only sort of Bellevue did run, apart from Scunthorpe, ran a couple of meetings, but that's what you can sort of compare it to.
Yeah, well, the strange thing is that in the wartime, like Bellevue ran a complete season of 30
true.
matches, so there were actually more meetings in 1940, 41, 42, 43, 44 than there was last year. So this is the slimmest Speedway season there has been since 1928.
Yeah, and that's that even it's hard to think that, because obviously the early days and everything, it's Speedway just sprung up out of nowhere anyway, and tracks opened everywhere and things like that. But I'm sure we can talk about Speedway history till the cows come home. I know we can, because both of us are very into the history. Yeah. So, but looking at yourself, obviously you've been involved in Speedway for a really long time, way before I was born.
Really long time.
Yeah. But so how did your sort of first interest become into Speedway then? Was it just something that your mum and dad took you to, or is it just something completely out of the blue?
No, very much not. But not my mum and dad. My parents weren't really interested in it at all. I lived in Liverpool. I think, but I'm not absolutely certain. I think I went, in the 50s, but certainly I went to every meeting at Liverpool in 1960. I just lived, probably a mile or so from the track. There's a park between the old Stanley track in Liverpool and where I lived. So I could walk across there. I would have been 15/16 in 1960. I went there. I left school when I was 16, went to work on a newspaper, which was actually in the town called St. Helens, which was on, it's probably 10 miles from Liverpool, but it is part of Liverpool almost. And they had a local newspaper which was called the Prescott and Highton Reporter. That was one of the group. And I was sent to work in the office in Prescott, which was between St. Helens and Liverpool. So the one thing I did when I was there was persuade the sports editor that I could cover Speedway. That was at the end of 1960. What I didn't know at the end of 1960, there'd be no Speedway at Liverpool in 1961. So I didn't cover it, but I'd got to know at the end of 1960 another journalist called Frank McLean, who used to write for the Speedway Star, as well as for the local Liverpool Echo and various newspapers. And I don't know, even though he's a little bit, or quite a bit older than me, we seemed to strike up a relationship. And I used to go with him by train to Bellevue. At the time, Frank didn't drive at all. So, I think I got the bus into this Lime Street station or Exchange station, can't remember which. I'd meet Frank and I'd go with him on the train. We'd then get the Speedway special from the centre of Manchester to Bellevue. And that was my introduction to it. And I wrote an article about Son Sir Joston, who was a well-known ex-world finalist, Bellevue star, spectacular Swedish rider. Sent it off. I typed it out on my little new typewriter, put it in the envelope, sent it off to the Speedway Star offices. And lo and behold, I think maybe 2-3 weeks later, I got my Speedway Star, and there was this article by Peter Oakes in it. And cool. I've been doing it ever since. And I've worked for the Speedway Star ever since. I've not missed any years with them. And it's always run as a freelance, parallel to my full-time job as a journalist on various newspapers. That was my introduction to it, and it developed from there. I started doing that. I started doing some publicity and press work for both Mike Parker and Reg Fearman, which was again in the early 60s, in the provincial league days. And I can't really remember how I came, because the first track I was actually involved in on the other side, the admin side, was Exeter. And I can't really remember how that came about. A lot of people assume that it was because when Ivan Mauger joined Exeter, but it wasn't. I'd actually been going to Exeter with Wally Maudsley for quite a few years before Ivan ever joined Exeter. So that was my entree into the administrative side, the team managing side, and eventually the promoting side. But at the same time, always had the journalistic side, which paid all my bills.
And
Speedway didn't, believe it or not.
No, I can believe that. But we'll come on to that sort of side in a bit. But it's great to hear, because obviously old track, for example, Liverpool. Not many people know. I mean, I've got friends who are Liverpool football fans, and they never know that Speedway existed in Liverpool until I tell them that sort of thing, and that sort of thing. And they're like, "Oh, really? Yeah." So that's when I said, "Yeah, it used to go. It used to be the Chads," and it was the start of several riders who were great riders. Well, a certain rider called Peter Craven, who started his career there, and everything, and then obviously went on to Bellevue. But yeah, to hear that your proper first sort of introduction was at Bellevue, I mean, that must have been, sort of jaw-dropping at your young age at that time, to go to such a big stadium.
I don't really know whether it was. I don't know. Like, to me, the place to go had been Liverpool.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's like with football, isn't it? I'm a Scouser, born and bred, and I lived in Liverpool all my childhood life until I left to go to work. And the one thing I was a Liverpool fan, like your mates, in the very beginning, and I was a Speedway fan. And I'm not really sure. I think they were both equal in. Like, I can always remember in 1960 when Liverpool had a very poor team. They were bottom, next to bottom of the league. Only Bradford were worse.
Mm.
And one day there was a match between Liverpool and Coventry B, as
Oh
in
yes, yeah.
and I always remember that after that match, that in the Coventry team was a rider called Cole Smith,
Okay.
who Cole went on and became machine examiner in retirement at Coventry. But Cole was, when it was announced that Cole Smith was joining Liverpool from First Division Coventry, that really was like Kenny Dalglish joining Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I got visions of this Cole Smith. I'd seen him. Oh, he's a great big star. Because the strange thing about those early years before TV is that you didn't know riders from other clubs.
Mm.
Like I didn't know in 1960, say, Old Funding or Barry Briggs. And I genuinely thought that there were 7 riders at Liverpool were amongst the best riders in the world. I couldn't understand why they weren't getting picked for England or riding in a world final. And I think that's the way we all were with football as young people. You're probably too young but of my era, you never saw football on TV, so you didn't know that somebody like Nat Lofthouse, or all you knew was your own players. Because when I first started watching Liverpool, they were in the second division, and I genuinely thought that some of the Liverpool players, why weren't they in the England squad? And I think that was a great introduction to Speedway, because we had some decent riders, but they only built the team up as the season went by. They started off losing, and as I say, the only team they really beat was Bradford. But there were some good riders, people like Bryce Skrabitsky, Brian Craven, who was Peter's brother. I've told the story before that I had a coincidental sort of link to the Cravens, or particularly to Peter, because his workshop used to be just down the road from where I lived.
Okay, yeah.
And I would go down there. It was at a motorcycle shop called run by Charlie Oates, a former Liverpool rider, and I'd go down there and would actually watch Peter Craven cutting his rear tyre. But totally coincidentally, and that my father worked with Peter Craven and Brian Craven in an engineering factory, while my mother was also friends with Peter's wife, Brenda.
Yeah.
So both my parents actually knew Peter and Brenda totally separately. Nothing to do with them being together. They're just, my mother knew Brenda's sister. My father worked with Peter and with Brian. So I always had that link as well. And, to watch them I didn't see a lot of Peter, because obviously it was only I'd have first gone to Bellevue, maybe 60, but probably 61. And Peter was killed relatively shortly after that. But Bellevue, I had some great times watching there. I can always remember the first time I saw Soren Sejostin. He was in a test match, and it was pouring with rain. And it was bucketing down, and all the riders came out in overalls. I think he probably scored 14 or 15 points, but to see his style and still being able to reproduce this spectacular style, like he'd have been very suited to today's. He looked like a rider of the 2010s, 2020s, and that was a lasting impression of seeing this rain, this waterlogged, soaked track, and yet there they were, all blasting around. And it was really fun to watch, and some things stick in your mind, and that certainly is one of the things that I can always remember, have never forgotten. And if I close my eyes, I can almost picture it, even now.
But no, that's really cool to hear, though, because obviously, again, Soren Sjoston, is very much was a small rider, in the bike sort of thing. Very much similar to how Peter Craven rode, really.
Yeah.
You know, this is just showing my history knowledge of the sport straight away.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. But no, those sort of like memories. I mean, for myself, I mean, I have memories down from Dan Eastbourne when they won like the championship in '95. You know, and things like that. Me being a 5-year-old standing on the step ladder and watching them go around the track. You know, and things like that. I have like vivid memories of that sort of thing. You know, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, because obviously Bellevue. You know, again, a spectacular rider, interesting weather conditions, being wet and rainy, like it seems to always be in Manchester for most Speedway meetings, you know, and things like that. But just moving on from that sort of thing. So, did you manage to cover any other clubs then before you went into promoting, or was it just literally like Bellevue?
I acted as press officer for Halifax when they opened in, I think it was '64, and I organised all the sort of press on the build up to the opening. I went to when the second division formed, you know, in '68. You know, I think I probably certainly went to every northern track.
Yeah.
You know, during that year, after I left the local newspaper and went to work for freelance agencies, and one of them was in Burnley, and I lived in Diggs, just outside Burnley, but that was close to Nelson.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So I went to Nelson every week. And you know, at Nelson, I sort of struck up a particular friendship with somebody who you probably know, Jack Lee.
Oh, yes, Jack Lee, yep.
Who went on to be Buxton team manager. You know, and Jack and his wife Di, and you know, myself and Pam, we became pretty friendly with them. And that was, you know, and if you look back, that's back to '68, '69. You know, and there we are, still friends today, and still both involved in Speedway. You know, I went. I think I worked it out. I was trying to not so long ago as to which tracks I hadn't been to, and there are very few. And I've probably been to 90 odd tracks, I would think, if not more, in England. I'm just trying to. There were some in that old provincial league in the '60s I didn't go to. I never went to Neath, for example. Although I have since been to Neath to see you know, where the track was. I never went to the old St. Austell, and there are quite a few of the southern tracks I never went to. But I used to have an aunt and an uncle who lived in Hastings.
Oh, yes, not far from me. Yeah.
I'd go and spend summer holidays down in Hastings. And I would go then on the Sunday to Eastbourne, believe it or not.
Oh, right, okay.
During it must have been the Southern Area League.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't league racing as we know it today. So even when I was on holiday, I would, you know, go and watch a Speedway meeting. And, you know, as things worked on, I used to really tour the country. And then I met Ivan Mauger when he came over to Newcastle in the early '60s, and we became, you know, totally close friends. And I'd go with him, say up to Newcastle, to Middlesbrough, to all those sort of northern tracks. So I got a fair old grounding in the northern tracks.
Yeah, so I mean, when you say about tracks you think you didn't go to, there must be a handful of tracks you never got to. Like you say, you didn't get to go to Neath and places like that. But, you know, even just to mention the tracks that you did go to, which aren't no longer existing sort of thing, you know, I can think of one probably like maybe went to like Sunderland or somewhere up there, up in the north, you know, and places like that. But so how did your sort of, you said you met Ivan when you went to Newcastle. Obviously, this was Ivan's second stint at British League Racing. What was he sort of like in those sort of like early days? Obviously, I've read his book, and it's amazing to hear his side of it. But to hear someone else's side of it would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, well, I don't know why he rode for Mike Parker, and as I said to you, I'd worked for Mike Parker on a freelance basis, and I think that is probably how we came to first meet. And you know, and strange enough, his wife Ray. You know, I must have met him when I was in, what would it be? I know that she said to me, I must have been in Diggs. So, and she sort of said, well, come over for Sunday lunch.
Oh, okay.
You know, we didn't know each other other than, I don't know how, maybe I'd gone round to their house to talk to him, to do a story on him. But she said, "Oh, come and have lunch with us Sunday," when she knew I was only in digs. I went, had Sunday lunch with them, which was a curry. And from there, it just developed, and we became, he was the closest friend I had. At one stage, there would probably never be a day when we didn't speak to each other. Even when I moved down to London area, we would always speak to each other. And but I got on with Ivan. My wife Pam got on with Ray. We had a daughter, Sarah, who's the same age or a little bit in between with Julie and Debbie. Okay. So she got on with them. We all got on with Kim.
Yeah.
And, we just became, family friends, and went on a couple of holidays. I went and stayed with them in Christchurch in New Zealand. Or in fact, I didn't stay with Ivan and Ray. I stayed with Ivan's brother, Trevor Mauger.
Right.
He was another rider, and his wife Bernice, and also there, roughly the same age again as my daughter, was their daughter Jackie.
Oh, okay.
Jackie Major actually went on to be a Speedway rider.
Oh.
Finished, I think it was 7th in the New Zealand Championship. So she was a pretty decent Speedway rider. And probably, if she'd have been born here, she'd have, I don't know what she would have done, but she was a good rider and a good pedigree. And everything developed from there. We were friends with Trevor and Bernice. We still keep in touch with Bernice today. Trevor died some years ago. Keep in touch with Jackie. Still keep in touch with all of Ivan's children. And we, as I say, we stayed with them in New Zealand for the Commonwealth Games. Went to the Commonwealth Games together. We then went to Australia when he was doing one of the tours with Barry Briggs. So we spent holidays over on the Gold Coast with them. So we became really close friends and formed a company together, which we managed, which did things like training schools. We sold merchandise and did a lot. I can't remember how many, but we've probably done a dozen books together.
Yeah. Because I've got several of yours and Ivan's books in my bookcase here, sort of thing, which I do like looking at and reading and things like that. So, but the friendship that you guys had, like you said, it's basically family. Your family and his family are virtually intertwined with each other. It's great to hear and great to have seen all those photos with you and Ivan together and things like that. But obviously, like I say, keep in touch with Debbie and all that. Like, I see Debbie and Kim and things like on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of thing. That sort of thing. But because you mentioned Jackie, it was like, oh yeah, it rings a bell, Jackie Major, because I think it was on his Circuits of Gold documentary in New Zealand about him that it mentioned it. Cause I think she did like a Ronnie Moore training school or something like that, and he was there for that. I thought, okay, they are actually related and it's in the blood sort of thing. So
it's a niece. It's Ivan. It's Ray's niece.
Yeah, that's interesting to know, and obviously it's in the blood because if she finished 7th in the New Zealand Championships, you never know. It could have been the first female rider to go far in the sport, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, other than Sabrina Boy of Denmark, who won the Danish Under-21 Championship, I think Jackie was probably, I would have thought, the second best female speedway rider there's been in my time, and in your time, obviously.
Yeah, in my time as well. Yeah. Obviously, because you see nowadays, you see girls having to go in this country, in the States, and all that sort of thing. So it's always good to see that there is female riders having to go. And never know, one day one of them might just crack it. You never know. So
you hope so, don't you? Personally, I'd love to see that. I think that would be an enormous, boost for the sport to have a female rider who holds her team place at say even to start with at National League level, then certainly at Championship level, because I think it would open so many doors.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I say, it opens many doors. It'll get seen a lot more, I think, and it'll be talked about a lot more because obviously you get female car drivers, you get female, superbike riders, and things like that. So yeah, I think if someone could crack it, it'll be good. It'll definitely be good for the sport.
Inevitably, I think one will. If they're given the right opportunities and the chances, but because I don't know. I've never ridden a speedway bike, but you know, is it impossible for a woman to have the strength to ride one? You'll
I
know
don't,
better than me, Neil.
yeah, I don't think there is, because I think it's the same with if you're a guy. As long as you train hard and you know what to train on, the upper body, cardio mainly, things like that, and also eat the right foods, you can do it. It's like a woman playing football. You know, the women's league in football, they can do it as good as the guys can do it. You know, I think if you train right, and like I said, the dedication and also having the sort of right people around you. You know, I'd always encourage anyone to try Speedway. You know, I mean, I love doing the training schools. I love doing when Eastbourne had their training track, the original track, and all that sort of thing. You know, I loved going out on the 125s, 200s on my own bike and ride around with the little kids. You know, that sort of thing, because that helped push them on. And now I see them riding 250, going out to 500s now. And I thought, well, I helped them a little bit on the junior track, you know, and things like that. So, you know, I would encourage it. And, you know, if any female riders want to watch or have a go, I would say definitely do it if you're watching.
And you know, again, I'm talking in very sort of personal thoughts. That I'm amazed Speedway hasn't, you know, given more opportunities to females, but also encourage more females to go along, because you know, there's a lot of funding out there if you run female sport, and there are a lot of young girls who, you know, love it and would love to have a go. And who knows, you know, if there was a ladies' league, you don't know where that could lead.
Exactly.
Like, you know, like you, I used to be totally dismissive of, you know, ladies' football and women's football. You know, but as they were given more and more encouragement, you know, you can watch a game. And okay, it's a little bit slower and they're not quite as strong or as athletic, but it's still an enjoyment watching them on occasion. You looked at the Women's World Cup, and there were some terrific, you know, performances and some terrific games. Yeah, and it can stand on its own. Whether it'll ever happen in Speedway, who knows?
I don't know. I think that's more down to sort of, again, encouragement, and also being. So I think maybe they could see it as it's more too much of a man's sport anyway, because it's motorbikes. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to tell, because obviously you've got the likes of Sarah Cords in America, who's riding against the top boys in America, you know, and things like that. So it's hard to say. I think it has to be something that has to be pushed at a training sort of grassroots level, and then, like you said, progress to this, like the junior leagues, and then progressing on to the National League, hopefully. But you never know. Fingers crossed. You know, you could see a women's league in the future. You never know, because obviously these new times that are around the corner after COVID, nothing's. No, you never know. But turning back to obviously your involvement in Speedway back in the heyday of the 60s and the 70s and things like that. Looking back, as myself was looking back at sort of like the research and looking back at it that way, you know, it was a boom year for Speedway. You know, the second division was booming with like 18 tracks, I think, at one point. You know, the top league had 12, 13 tracks, maybe more. I can't remember off the top of my head now when I'm looking at the books. But yeah, you know, so your time to be involved with Ivan, just as he was getting going on the international scene as well as riding well for Newcastle, must have been a fantastic thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it was. I think you don't. I don't think you actually acknowledge it or realise it at the time, you know, because to me, Ivan was just a mate. Okay, there was totally the serious side of it, you know, because he wanted to win things. But in those first few years when he was in the provincial league, you know, he wasn't likely to win a world championship. But you know, you could see the work that he put in, and you know, he lived in a house which was part of 3 or 4 houses that were owned by Mike Parker, which were all occupied by Speedway riders. So it wasn't only Ivan. You know, there were people like the late Gary Peterson, Dave Gifford, Bruce Ovenden, Ollie Olsen eventually. There were so many Speedway riders up there. And when I was based in the north, I could more or less go to Upper Chorlton Road and, you know, talk to probably 10 Speedway riders. You know, Torbjorn Harrison, who went to Newport, he lived up there. Murray Burt, Alan Painter, Terry Shearer. You know, these are names which might mean something to you, but don't mean that much to other people. But these were all more than competent riders, racing either at, you know, first division level or second division level. And it was great to sort of, as a Speedway fan, as well as a Speedway journalist, to be, you know, in that little little body. I think I've said before, I always remember the day that Jim Airy and Gordon Guasco
Oh yeah.
came over, and it snowed. And they were like two little kids because they'd never seen snow.
Yeah.
They'd come over from Australia, they'd come over from Sydney, they'd never seen snow, and all of a sudden there was this white stuff coming down, and genuinely they were just like little kids.
Yeah.
The 6-year-old you see out in the park, the first of snow. But,
Yeah.
They're the sort of things that stick in your memory of these people, not so much their performances and what they did on track, but those off track, little insights to them. And it was a super start for me in doing writing about Speedway. To have that close relationship with so many riders, but in such an area of covering literally 3 houses, all next door to each other. And I suppose that probably helped me on the journalistic work. I lost all that when I moved down to the London area in 1965. But up to there, they were good times in the old provincial league. And, I'd go down to Wolverhampton on a Monday, where, Gordon Guasco and Jim Airy were riding for Wolverhampton then, Sunderland having closed down midway, or not even midway, early in the season. I'd go to Bellevue on a Saturday, or at Nelson, I think, was on a Saturday as well. Into all those, I'd go to Halifax. There's just so many sort of tracks you could go to. It was just nice to be able to do. I can go up to Newcastle, I could go up to Middlesbrough. So I got a lot of Speedway in those early days.
Yeah, I can imagine so, because obviously, like I say, 1965 was the year the British League formed after the Provincial League, and was it the old National League that sort of folded? Yeah, because reading the history books, as I've done in the past, it was always dubbed as Mike Parker who made the suggestion of forming the British League, and things like that. So what sort of bloke was Mike Parker like to work for then? Was he a nice guy?
I'm not going to say he was a nice guy. He was a fairly strong, very, very strong personality. But I think almost without exception, like everybody I actually worked for, they were always straight. You hear so many stories about the old promoters and the tricks that they got up to, but I can honestly say that from a totally personal point of view, I never ever had a problem with anyone. They paid me what they said they'd pay me. They paid it on time. I could never turn around and say, oh, well, so and so still owes me money. But Mike was a strong personality. He probably was. His big advantage, I think, over everybody else is he wasn't a Speedway fan.
Oh, okay.
He was an ex-midget car driver, and who started to put on what are called composite meetings, which were basically bikes and cars. And he suddenly realised that it was Speedway that brought the people in. So he got involved, and with Reg Fearman, they opened 2, 3, 4 tracks maybe, and other people from the South and the Midlands joined in to give you the Provincial League, which was, in my time, that was the first big boom time for Speedway. There were other times later on, but certainly 1960 it was, because suddenly mushroomed. You had this new league with new tracks, a lot of old riders, a lot of riders who were second halfers at the National League First Division tracks. But they came out, and it was real rough and ready. The tracks were rough and bumpy. But Parker's philosophy always was that if there are bumps, riders are going to fall off, and that's what people love to see.
That is true. Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. But hearing those sort of like early days, hey, boom of the new provincial league, it gave starters like Len Silver a chance to ride well, in the league, and people like that. I don't know too many riders of that sort of time, because at that sort of thing, I sort of focused on the top leagues. Obviously, they're the names that I recognise and things like that. But there you go. But hearing all these sort of little stories, is what I personally love to hear, and what people have listened to the shows of love to hear. The little stories. You can see the names of the riders in the Speedway Star or in your books, in the stats and all that sort of thing. But to know these people as individuals, it's great. It's great to hear that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there were so many personalities around. Nearly all the promoters were ex-riders. Mike Parker was obviously the biggest exception.
Yeah,
you had people like Trevor Redmond, Fats as they called him. In New Zealand. He was, such a personality. He ran Neath, but he also ran Glasgow. Then he ran St Austell. And he was a total one-off character personality. And every track had them. You just say Len Silver. There was another rider who I don't know, his name might mean something to you. Howdy Bayford.
Yes, yeah.
Howdy, who'd sort of been in the Japanese prisoner of war camps, for 3 or 4 years. He would go on the centre green with a guitar and would sing. And he'd just play his guitar and sing to the crowd.
Yeah.
And this would be in the interval. And there were people, almost every team had the sort of character. Some very good riders like Paul, with Ken Middleditch and Tony Lewis. And, every club, a lot of the provincial league tracks got riders who had been in teams in the 50s, but had more or less slipped out, but they came back. I don't know how far your knowledge of Eastbourne goes back, because you've been so young.
Yeah.
So the Reg Trott.
Yeah, Reg Trott rings a bell with me, because
an experienced first division rider who went to Eastbourne in 68, 69 or whenever it was, and was a lovely old boy. And he, I'm sure he gave so much help to the younger riders at Eastbourne in that era. There were people like Jim Tebby of Wimbledon. Like Jim was known as Slim Jim, precisely because he wasn't.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've seen pictures of Jim. Yeah.
But he again was a totally lovely bloke. Like he really was. And he was a big favourite of the crowds. Like that was one of the big things that you had, I think, in the 60s and 70s. You had riders who weren't necessarily the stars who became the favourites. That nowadays, fans will be on their high horse and say, "Oh, get rid of him." Because we're only scoring 3 or 4. But Jim, like everyone would be up in the air when he won a race. He didn't win that many, but he average, and he'd score 5 every meeting. The meeting that he got 8, everyone would be talking about him, and the riders would mix with the fans afterwards as well. They wouldn't be dashing off to get the 6 a.m. flight out to Sweden on the Tuesday morning, or to Poland on the Sunday. And almost every team had a personality. Like Newport at one stage had a rider called Sandor Levi.
Yep.
Who was always involved in punch-ups. Many of them. There were, Bill Andrew, who was, rode for Poole, that he was also a professional jockey.
Ah, okay.
Won races. He wasn't just a professional jockey who would be in point to point or at the back of the field. He won races for one of the top West Country trainers, Les Kennard. And almost all these, a lot of the riders had backstories. They were so different. Maybe because they weren't all full-time professional riders. A lot of them had other jobs. Like Soren Sejostin was an ex-wrestler.
Never knew that.
There was another rider called Laszlo Munkazi, who was a Hungarian who defected from Hungary during the revolution. And he was just a big, strong, almost a blacksmith. and he really looked at them. But there are all these sort of people, riders who are around, that they had their own following because they were such big personalities. Like, I'm sure you've heard of Ivor Brown of Cradley
Yeah,
Heath,
yeah.
the one everyone used to hate if they weren't Cradley supporters. Actually, even it's probably still there now, but there certainly used to be a sign over one of the bridges, didn't it, in sort of Dudley area with Ivor Brown's name.
Oh, right. Oh, that's cool.
And there were so many, like, and that also shows the status that Speedway had in those days. It truly was the second most popular sport after football.
Yeah, because I definitely think, because looking back at the history books and old programs that I collect and all that sort of thing, you say people like Reg Trott and stuff like that. I do recognise that, because obviously he was West Ham as well as then going to Eastbourne as well as Norwich, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, even having see, I know my stuff. But it's like people even like Dave Lanning, who came from West Ham to Eastbourne, and who basically kick-started Eastbourne into the leagues properly, with Charlie at the helm as well. It's, and then you had all those sort of lesser sort of riders from the top league in there. So like you had like your reserves of the old National League sort of days in the or the new National League, or the British League Division 2 as it was then, and stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, I think I remember reading in in Ivan's book was that he had a tussle with Ivor Brown, I think, in one meeting when Newcastle were at Crayley, and, Ivor had him off one time, and then Ivan had Ivor off the next time, sort of thing, and then the Crayley fans started booing Ivan Mauger, and you think, that must have been some great times.
Yeah, as a side to that, like, Ivor Brown was genuinely the one rider that Ivan hated.
Oh, right, okay.
And that isn't putting too fine a point about it, that he absolutely hated him. And I'm sure that had the situation arisen, he'd have quite happily thumped him. They just hit each other in those days.
Yeah.
They would have a tussle on track. One would think the other would be naughty, so they'd end up, on the floor, either in the pits or out on the track on the shale, trying to punch each other, rather like ice hockey.
Yeah.
They were all foolish enough to keep their helmets on, or clever enough to keep their helmets on.
I would say it's clever.
Because no one ever got injured and nobody ever got hurt. But that was all part of it. And riders could storm up to the referee's box and threaten the referee, and not be banned for a year.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that it's unfortunately been drummed down at Speedway. Whether that's because of political things or whatever, trying to be PC and everything nowadays. I think that's the sort of thing that you need back in the sport. A bit of controversy, a bit of the old fans booing riders and all that sort of thing. You need that atmosphere back, because I think it's very much lackluster. Because obviously, again, you get it in football. People boo someone if they do like a dirty challenge, or the referee doesn't see nothing. You hear boos in the crowd, but you don't hear it in Speedway no more.
That is a really good point you raise, Neil, that you don't hear a crowd booing someone.
No. You
never hear them booing them on parade. Like, there used to be people who would stand there and knew that if they didn't get booed, they would want to know what on earth they'd done right, rather than...
Yeah.
I know, again, to come forward to sort of when I promoted at Peterborough, one of the biggest crowds we ever had was against Ipswich, after we'd had previously an incident between Jeremy Doncaster and Ronnie Pedersen.
Oh, okay.
Where it was there was a crash involved, and there was everybody was furious about it. But the pair of them, they got on all right once they're off the track.
Yeah.
But they played up for it, and genuinely, the next time, Jeremy Doncaster came to Peterborough, it was the biggest crowd of the season, because the fans all wanted to see the rematch of Ronnie against Jem, and those were the sort of things that. And that was relatively late. That was in the 90s.
Yeah.
But they're the sort of things that used to bring in the people. Because I also, one of the other sports that I write a lot about is ice hockey. And we all know that people go to ice hockey to see the fights.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Very, very rarely get injured.
Yeah.
You don't very often see an ice hockey player who's had a bit of a punch up.
Mm.
have to pull out of the match because they've been injured, and the fans love it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can vouch for that, because I went to go to Anaheim when I was in America a couple of years ago, and I saw ice hockey there, and they had a punch up, and the whole stadium erupted. It was funny but really strange atmosphere to sort of be engulfed in. Of course, where I was sitting, I was right up in the gods sort of thing, so I was looking down on everyone and that sort of thing. You saw everyone at the glass banging and all that sort of thing. You think, Jesus Christ, and then the fight's over in sort of like 20 seconds, but it's like the whole stadium's erupted. But the only thing I can relate to that in recent times is the Eastbourne versus Glasgow meeting from 2019, when everybody booed Glasgow on the Eastbourne side. That's the only other thing I can relate to that, because I was there that night, and it was a bit hot under the old collar, but I won't say too much about that match.
I would imagine that the atmosphere was great, wasn't it?
Oh, it was brilliant, because the whole stadium was on Eastbourne side, and as you imagine, the riders got announced and everything, and everyone, the whole stadium booed, and I ended up laughing, because it was just like, it was a great atmosphere. It was good and bad for Speedway, but it got press and everything, didn't it? So no bad press in Speedway, I think, nowadays.
There isn't bad press in life, is there? Nothing in entertainment or a sport. There's no such things as bad press. Like, okay, yeah, there is. I tell a lie. Drugs is bad.
Yeah, but the exceptions are the exceptions. But when you get sort of like a booing crowd or whatever like that, then that's different.
People absolutely love it, don't they?
Exactly. But go back onto, say, your own career and all that sort of thing. Helping Ivan to all his world championships and things like that. Obviously, along the road, was it quite a rocky road then to him to get his first world title then?
Well, it obviously was, to some degree. Like the big rocky road had been when he first came over in the late 50s at Wimbledon, and when he rode for Eastbourne, and all at Rye House. But from 63, he was always a good rider at his level. And he then made that step up. And I think from 66 onwards, you'd have said he was always in with a chance of becoming a world champion. I'm not going to say he was at world champions level in 66, 67, but he was getting very close to it, and you could see that he would push on and would have a chance of being world champion. That because his attitude, his professionalism was totally off the scale. There were a lot of good riders in those days, people previously like Ronnie Moore, Barry Briggs, Obi Fundin, Bjorn Nuts, and people like that. But I would say Ivan was the most professional of them all. He wasn't the most talented. By his own admission, he didn't have a fraction of the talent of a Ronnie Moore, and someone like that. But he made up for that by working. He would have suited today's climate, because today your riders are more professional and fitter than they've ever been, I think, in history. Certainly as a group. Maybe there were in the past, there were the odd one or two, who were true athletes. But today, almost every rider is an athlete, certainly at in the top flight in every country. They're just professional athletes. But Ivan was one of the first that he trained regularly with Manchester City. He looked after himself. He'd go out on the bike ride. He'd go on a run. He wouldn't drink during the season very often. No, he'd never. I don't think during the season, except say after winning a world championship. I can't remember during the season seeing him off his head. And I think in those days there were riders by and large were drinkers, because as soon as the meeting was over, they'd be in the bar. But I think he changed all that. He obviously changed it by having two bikes in the pits. Before anyone else had two bikes in the pits. His machinery was looked after immaculately by those who worked for him, people like Gordon Stobbs, Guy Allett, who did his engines. And one of the things which people probably don't realise about Ivan is how loyal he was. Like even today, Ray, Julie, Debbie, the people who were around Ivan in the early days are still friends and are still in touch with them regularly. And that is rare for a speedway. Like, you look at a lot of speedway riders, they go through mechanics a little bit, like you or I would go through a morning paper. But Ivan didn't. He had the same people with him from start to finish. And I think that was another of the major traits of his personality. He was a loyal person. The people he originally stayed with in London, the Hone family, Jim Hone and his wife, that Ivan remained in touch with Jim right up to his final days.
Yeah.
And Steve Hone, who you may have known from riding, but the photographer, he was sort of Jim's son, and he was still in touch with Ivan right up to the end. And that takes a lot, going from when you're talking about 60 years to still have the same friends. And that was another side to Ivan, that he was enormously loyal with people, and a friend of Ivan's was a friend for life.
Yeah, and I mean, to have, like you say, one mechanic, one engine tuner, all the way through pretty much his whole career, like you say, because nowadays riders go through things like there's no tomorrow, and that sort of thing. I think I heard a podcast with what was it? Tony Ricardson was talking about him and Thomas Golob, how they used to sort of try and psych each other out and things like that. So like one year Tony had Thomas's mechanics, the other year Thomas had Tony's mechanics, and that sort of, to try and get a psychological advantage. But then, but going back to the sort of days of Ivan, and Ollie and people like that, it's like it's a completely different time, because like I say, Ivan was the trendsetter for what is now a professional speedway athlete, really, by being so disciplined. I mean, I've seen the documentaries. I think one of them was from either 76 or 77, where he saw like the local Manchester, I think it was, do a documentary on him, and he talks about obviously the 76 final, where a bit in the carburetor robbed him of winning that world final, which he thinks he should have won, and things like that, but for him to win his first world championship, I mean, it must have been a huge relief for himself. You, Ray, the kids, and all that sort of thing. You think all that hard work, he's finally done it.
No, at the time you never thought about it.
Oh, okay.
At the time you just were celebrating that he'd become world champion, and I don't think he may have done, but I don't. We never ever. I can never remember sitting down and sort of saying, "Oh yeah, God, that's a relief, isn't it? That's out of the way." Because he always thought he was going to win it. He always had that when I say always, I mean from the time he became a realistic challenger. He always had that inner belief that he was going to be world champion, that he was better than anyone else.
Which of course he proved, not necessarily always on the speedway, but he proved it on the long track, grass tracks, sand tracks. He did everything near enough, apart from obviously ice racing. He left that to Cribby to do, And,
he did ice racing.
Oh, did he? Oh, right. I didn't realise that.
He rode in the World Ice Speedway Championship.
Okay.
With a fellow New Zealander called Goog Allen.
The name rings a bell, yeah.
They both rode in the World Ice Speedway. They didn't do very well, but he was in it. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go then. So
something, Neil.
Yeah, well, there you go. I've learned something tonight. There you go, straight up. But no, you say that from like 66 onwards, he sort of hit the ground running, because I think that was the year he won the European final, wasn't it? At Wembley was 66.
I don't know.
Okay. I think that's what.
I can't pluck those things out of my head.
No, I think that was probably his first sort of real world championship sort of win, really, in speedway sort of thing. But then, like you say, to win 3 world championships in a row, with Ivan saying that his hardest one was at the 1970 world final in Wrocław, where he said, I think he quoted him saying that it's anyone could have won it that day because it was such an open field.
Yeah, he didn't believe that then.
No, but he didn't believe it. No, but he said after he won it. Yeah. So
a lot of things you can say after.
Yeah. But it is though, because obviously that was the first time it was held in Poland, the final, and things like that. So I mean, going there, did you go out there yourself, or was it one of those you did? Yeah. What was sort of the atmosphere like in that sort of era in Poland?
Absolutely staggering. You can imagine you've got. Well, Wembley was always staggering because you'd got 90,000 people at Wembley, but you you had more than that, and and the Poles were then like they are now. They were so fanatical, and they'd whistle. Well, that's something you never hear in England, do you?
No.
Whistling the non-home riders.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whistle as soon as, not just as soon as any rider other than a Pole came out. There's this big crescendo of whistles, and it must have been. Like I know the hairs on the back of my neck would stand up when I was in the pits, when you would hear it. But what it must, I don't know what it was really like for for someone who was competing in it. But no, we had fun beforehand. That Ivan deliberately rode the wrong rind, and at the track to see.
Yeah, yeah. Because in his book, I think he says that he rode different lines, different techniques, and then he worked out. I think he did one meeting before the final, a couple of years before, like a World Team Cup. I think it might have been, where he said if he sat on the seat like a Polish or a Russian rider did, he got more traction. So he rode like that when he went out for the 1970 final, and he said it worked. So for him to even look and learn at other riders, he was always learning and sort of moving forward. It shows the true pro that he was.
Yeah. We used to have the books, with everything written in that, which had more or less everything down to what the cup of tea tasted like in the pits. And he was the ultimate professional in every sense of the word.
Yeah, and like I said, it paved the way for what the riders are like now. Really, with the fitness, the nutrition, the mental side of it, and all that sort of thing. But stepping away a bit from Ivan and getting back onto yourself, you dabbled in a bit of promoting in the early 70s. Was it with Barrow? Was it you, Ivan?
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, with Ivan and Wally Maudsley, we opened Barrow in 72.
Oh, 72 was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So how was that then? Because that's obviously your first sort of real dabble into promotion.
It was a little bit of a nightmare because only in the sense that Wally Maudsley lived in Upminster in Essex, and I lived in Bishop Stortford.
Oh yes, yeah.
In Hertfordshire, Essex. So our trips to Barrow were long trips, as you can imagine.
I bet they were, yeah.
Don't know how far it is, but it was a heck of a long way. And I was working then full time on the people. So I would literally come back from Barrow on a Tuesday night and be in the office in the morning. So I didn't have a lot of sleep. Proved probably then that you can't really successfully run a track unless you're based in the area. And since then, everywhere I've sort of been involved in, where I've had my money in it, I've always lived within that area. And we sold out at the end of the first season simply because of the time element of it all.
Did Barrow get like a good bit of support then from the crowd and things like that then at that time, or was it?
It wasn't sort of Workington proportions. Like Workington got much bigger crowds than Barrow did, but it was okay. Could have been a lot better, but could have been worse.
Yeah, could have been. But still, it gave you more friendships within the sport, knowing different riders again and things like that. But when I did my research into yourself and looked at obviously all the clubs that you worked with, the next sort of dabble you didn't have was until you went down to sort of Exeter. Was that 84 then? Was it the next time you really sort of
no, I'd been involved in Exeter from the late 60s.
Yeah.
But I used to go down with Wally Maudsley. I'd drive over to his house and then go down. He'd drive all the way down to Exeter and all the way back. And I was doing press work for them and team managing for them. But in 1980, the end of 79, Wally Maudsley and John Richards, who were the promoters, decided they couldn't carry on in the first division, that they were losing money. And I then became Wally's partner for a year. And we ran Exeter in the old second division. And then I stayed on with Reg and bought out Wally's half. And we then ran it till the end of 84. And then we sold out to Colin Hill at the end of 1984, which was after probably one of the worst years that I've ever had in Speedway. But a combination of things that in '83 we won the second division, the National League Knockout Cup against Weymouth. But I made the mistake of saying to the supporters earlier on, I said, look, if we're successful, we'll go back into the first division. And that was a mistake. I shouldn't have said that, but I kept my word. And then we launched an appeal to raise some funds to pay to get into the first division, which we got decent support from it. But again, where we hit the biggest problems, then we couldn't get a team.
Okay, yeah.
That we went into the British League, I think it was then.
Yeah.
And Newcastle also went in. So all of a sudden there were 2 extra teams. Leicester had the closed down, and we bought Exeter bought Leicester's license, and we also bought all Leicester's riders.
Okay, yeah.
Which people like Les Collins, I can't remember all the others, but I think I'm not sure. I think Neil was also in it, and we bought them all. So we were fully expecting that we would line up with a team that was led by Les Collins, who world number 2. And, but they refused to come and ride at Exeter because they had other options, so they could afford to do that. We were promised various things from the Promoters Association, who said, we will look after you in Newcastle, we'll help you to build up teams. They didn't, and we were left floundering, and we never had a team that was truly competitive in the first division. One of the most remarkable achievements from my point of view was we didn't collect the wooden spoon. That we didn't finish bottom of the table. And that is one of the, strange enough, that's one of the proudest things in my head, that I've never ever at a team I've been involved with finished bottom. Despite
That's a good record. That's a good record to have.
Having on occasion some very poor teams.
Yeah.
What we had at Exeter was a good team that if we could have kept it together for 2 or 3 years, it would have been really good, because riders like Andy Campbell, Keith Millard, these were riders who were young and were coming on. But we had one of our biggest blows that we signed a rider who you may not have heard of, called Buddy Robinson.
No, it doesn't ring a bell with me, no.
He was an American who was known as the Flying Hawaiian.
Oh,
because he was born in Hawaii. Yeah. Came over and he was really exceptionally good. He came, I think from memory, joined us midway through the season and really settled in quickly. He went home for a round of the AMA National Championship. And then, because of, I'm not really ever got to the bottom of it, the AMA refused to let him come back.
Oh, okay.
And he was whipped away. And results started to go against us again. Crowds went down. I made another big mistake there, as I changed from a Monday night to a Friday night.
Okay, yeah.
On the basis that Friday you'd have children who would come. Children would come on a Friday night.
Yeah.
It didn't work that way, and people afterwards would say, "Oh well, you should have known Friday night Skittles night in Somerset and Devon, and everyone goes and plays Skittles on those nights." But it just didn't work, and we were left with the situation that we either had to lose the house or sell the Speedway, and we sold the Speedway. Also, it was further complicated that at the time I accepted a job as sports editor of the Daily Star in London. So I was literally commuting. I'd spend I'd travel up by train to London. I had a flat at the Barbican in London, where I stayed in the week. I'd come back to be at Exeter on the Friday night. And it was all sort of fraught with problems. We also had leaf wool, and Wallman, who was killed at Kings Lynn in an under-21 round. So that added to it, and the time, the night that happened, I was actually in America.
Oh, okay.
I'd gone over to America in my job for the opening of the Olympics in Los Angeles. So I suddenly got this call, to say, oh, Leif Wallman's been, we think he's been fatally injured. So that again, and then so many little, not little, because that was a big tragedy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So many things happened that year, and you get dragged down by it. You mentally, you suffer from depression. When you're losing money, it's difficult to lose money all the time, and you wonder what's going to happen, and it all just got too much. And on top of it, so we sold out to, as I say, Colin Hill, who'd been a minority shareholder in the Exeter promotion in '84. He took it over and then did a terrific job during his time at Exeter. But that was the end of my Exeter days. I then moved back to live in the London area. We sold the house in Dawlish in Devon. I moved back to the London area simply because I was based in London with my job. And then for the next, what would it be, 7 years? I did a little bit of. I'm trying to remember when I think then I went. The next time I got involved in the promotional side was Peterborough.
Yeah, I think it was your first sort of stint at Peterborough in the, sort of like the early '90s. But with you living in London, were you not ever sort of interested in taking over promotion at Wimbledon at all, or anything like that? Did anything like that come your way?
No. Well, I don't think there was even an opportunity to.
Okay.
To be honest with you, but, I lived out 30 odd miles from London. But no, I'd been bitten, hadn't I? So,
yeah. No, I was just curious because obviously when Wimbledon closed down in '91, obviously again that was a shareholders basically promotion who ran the club and everything. I didn't know if they had approached you or said, "Oh,
no." By then, I'm a person. I travelled about a lot of the country with a job, and by then in '91. I was living in Warrington in Cheshire.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you got the other way. Yeah.
No. Like I moved up to Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
With a job when I was promoted from London sports editor to national sports editor.
I see.
Actually produced in Manchester. So I had a spell living up there. I joined another ill-fated paper which closed after about 13 weeks, if that, called The Post.
Okay.
Which was a daily newspaper. I was sort of headhunted and offered a lot more money to go, and a promotion to be number 4 on the paper, an assistant editor on the paper in charge of features and overseeing sport. So I lived up in Warrington. And then in must have been 91, I don't know whether I had a call or James Easter and myself were going to open Blackpool.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That we went up there, that we saw the owners of the stadium, which was virtually on the promenade, on the seafront, set back. We agreed a deal and everything, and we were all set to open Blackpool. We were told by the council, there'll be no problem on planning. But as it happened, there was a problem on planning. They turned planning down. So all the time, we'd spent months, working on it, keeping it a total secret. No one outside our family circles had the slightest idea that we were looking and had done an agreement for Blackpool. And when Blackpool fell through, Peterborough had closed down.
Yeah.
That the previous owner, David Hawkins, had virtually gone bust. He'd left pet debts all over the place. And I think it was James who must have said, oh, look, why don't we look at Peterborough? We looked at Peterborough. We spoke to the BSBA. We were allowed to take over Peterborough. And in '92, and we opened Peterborough. And I then moved back down from the north to live in Peterborough, to run Peterborough. And we had a great time. We had a terrific, as you know, we had a tremendous first season. We walked away with, what was it, 4 of the trophies. We won the league. I think we won the Knockout Cup, and we had a terrific team. We had the best reserves in the country at that level, in Jason Crump and Paul Hurry.
They both did all right in the end, I think. They weren't all right.
Yeah. I always remember that we had a public meeting, the fans meeting, at the showground in one of the one of the halls that they've got at the showground. It must have been probably March, in which James and I, we stood up on stage and unveiled our team and said, our team is Mick Poole, Stephen Davis, Rod Calhoun, so and so, Jason Crump and Paul Hurry. Literally, you could hear the crowd go, whoa.
Hear a pin drop almost, yeah.
I can remember, a couple of them sort of said, "Rodriel, you just got a bunch of kids. What are you doing? They're just wobblers or whatever."
Yeah.
And even that first season that I think it's about our second or maybe third meeting. You started off the season with the Gold Cup.
Yes.
And, Mildenhall hadn't won a match in the Gold Cup, and they came and won at Peterborough.
Oh no.
Yeah. Quite genuinely, I can remember them pinning my daughter up against a wall on the way out of the showground.
Wow.
And bashed her for her father and James having got this dreadful team that couldn't beat Mildenhall. And it just shows you how fickle supporters can be. You'll probably get lots of supporters who will turn around and say, "Oh, I knew from day one that Jason Crump was going to be."
Yeah.
But it all turned around. It turned around when we actually signed Neville Tatum.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We'd signed and we'd bought Paul Whitaker. He was a good rider, Paul, but he'd been injured in 91. But we were convinced he would be okay, but he wasn't. He never really rode at the level he had been before. But Neville came in, and I don't think we hardly lost a match after Neville joined us, and ran away with everything. And we were the first promoters to win a league title for Peterborough, even though they've been running since 1970. And we built a young team, because my philosophy has always been to have young riders in the team. If you look back to Exeter, brought in people like Alan Rossiter, 17, Steve Bishop, who was in Keith Millard, who won the under-21 championship, who was a raw absolute novice. Andy Campbell, we came in. I've always believed in young riders, because I always believed young riders will give it absolutely everything, and that has followed through from Exeter. It followed through from Peterborough in later years, when we got to 96, and we had having exhibition rides in the second half or in the interval. It was Simon Stead, Oliver Allen and Dave Howe, who were all 14. That we then launched the Thundercats, the National Development League team, as was the league was called something else. And they all came through, and then I stayed at Peterborough till the end of '98. When again had a 97 was a tremendous season. We paid from memory £30,000 to Poole to sign Jason Crump.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we brought in people like Ronnie Pedersen, and a lot of riders who made their way in Speedway. But 97, it was absolutely terrific. I think we finished second. No, 97 was the bad season. Sorry, 96 was the really good season. But 97 was a nightmare with the Elite League or the British League, I can't remember
Yeah.
what it was called then. With that team, we had a really tough time, but the Thundercats walked away with the National League, and we lost one match all season. And this was a team that every single rider was a teenager. We lost one match at Exeter.
Well, yeah, you can be forgiven for Exeter because it's a bit of a daunting track for a couple of teenagers, a few teenagers. But yeah, I mean, I was going to come on to the Thundercats actually because I've had Ollie Allen and David Howe on the show previous, and both saying that it was the best times that they had in their early days of their career, and things like that. I mean, I bought the other day, I think it was Eastbourne Peterborough from '97, and then it showed the second half with Steady, David Howe, and Ollie Allen. You think, just thinking like now to where they were then, the careers that they're all going to have, later on.
Yeah. Well, even sort of people you almost forget about, Paul Clues.
Yep.
He had a fairly successful. Carl Wilkinson. We discovered Carl, or I discovered Carl Wilkinson on the beach at Mablethorpe.
Okay.
Someone had told me about, there's this lad who does sand track racing. So I went up there, to watch him. And the meeting I went to watch him, he was banned from the meeting. They're over exuberant and foul riding.
Oh, okay.
But then the late Pete Seaton, who died a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Pete then loaned him a bike. And Carl started in the second half and in the tail end of the Thundercats team. So you look, and when you consider Carl was still riding, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, we had an awful lot of riders who had incredible longevity in the sport. David Howe carried on for a long time. Steady did. Ollie did. The one who got away but career ended because of injury was Ross Brady.
Yes, Ross Brady, yeah.
Ross, was having a successful career until, he got hurt. There were terrific times. The Thundercats were probably the team I got the most enjoyment out of, because they were all young kids and all they wanted to do was race. It didn't matter what conditions were like or anything. They just wanted to get out and race. They didn't give, not one of them gave a minute's trouble or problems during the season. Normally you get riders who will come and sort of say, I've bent this. Can you give me 500 quid to get a new one? I can't ride next week unless I get this or that. And that 97 Thundercats was such a tremendous atmosphere that there's an atmosphere that remains with you, and you always remember and you always look back fondly, and that you then take, or I took, an awful lot of enjoyment then from seeing them progress in their careers. And to think now 2 of them are the joint England managers.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that sort of thing. And it was thanks to you giving them the chance in their careers, that they've got to where they are now, Simon and Ollie being the England team managers. And obviously Ollie doing a hell of a lot with Poltec and people and things like that. So, I mean, that must have a bit of interest for yourself, again, working with the young kids, trying to see the kids develop all the way through, and things like that, really.
Yeah. It's only when now, I've never even thought about it before. So we've had because Alan Rossiter we sort of gave his league debut to.
Yeah, that's true.
So the Great Britain team managers for the last how many? Probably 8-9 years now.
Yeah.
All came. I all had a hand in getting them going.
I see. But that's where it all hands. You see, from one good team manager, you passed all your wisdom on through.
No, I never team managed, did I?
Oh, that's true. I
never team managed Peterborough.
No.
Again, another of my beliefs is that the promoter should never be team manager.
Yeah, that's a good theory to have.
Yeah, I base that on I get to go on when I was at Coventry. One of the things I always said to Colin Pratt, who asked me to come in and be sort of team manager on it, was that I never wanted to know what the riders were earning. And you sort of said, well, why not? I said, because I don't want the riders ever to say that you put him in heat 15 because he's cheaper than me.
Okay, I see what you mean.
And I don't think a team manager should ever know what the riders are earning. So he should always make judgment on who are the two best riders or which two riders should go in it, rather than, like, I know some promoters will go around to a team manager and say, don't use so and so in heat 15 because he's on £20 a point more than so and so. And that's, so I've never team managed a team I've owned, except for the Thundercats.
Yeah, well, they were a bunch of kids who just enjoyed riding their bikes, so it made it a pleasure.
They were a bunch of kids who were on £10 a point and 10p a mile.
That's what I used to earn.
That's what every rider in that team earned.
Yeah,
none got more and none got less from memory. Yeah,
which is how it should be at National League level. But again, that's another story for another time, I think. But I mean, after your time at Peterborough and obviously the great memories with you and James and everyone else involved at the club, you moved on to was it to Swindon? You moved on to next to have a few years there. So was that again just someone saying to Peter, "Can you come and give us a hand," or is that just something that just happened?
That one was Richie Hawkins was riding for Swindon at the time, and Kevin Hawkins was going there, and I don't know whether Kevin sort of suggested it or not, but Pete Toogood asked if I'd go along and look after the juniors, I think, from memory. And I set up the little training track at the centre.
Oh, okay. I always wondered where that came from.
Yeah. I sort of organised that and ran that. And then I can't even remember who was team manager at the time, but they
would have been like Mick Bell or someone like that. Maybe would have been.
I don't remember.
No.
But anyway, I took over from them. That they resigned or couldn't do it, and I took over as team manager. And and I think I had a couple of seasons there. And then Terry Russell took over and appointed Roscoe as team manager. I never knew or anything. I just never heard from him after he'd taken over. No reason why he should have phoned me. He didn't. And then I don't know. I can't remember what years I was at Swindon.
Because Swindon went up into the Elite League in 2004 with Terry Russell and Alan Roster. So it must have been sort of...
I must have left there then in 2003.
Yeah.
And then I can't even remember when I went to Coventry.
Well, Coventry wasn't that sort of like 2007, 2006 maybe, sort of that sort of time? Because I think you went there when not long after Sandu took over. Because I think Colin brought in yourself and someone else to work with it.
What happened on that is that Colin rang me. I'd known Colin since 68 and used to live relatively close to Colin, and had always got on well with Col over the years. And he rang me and he sort of said, "Look, Sandu wants to appoint a new team manager. I think that the guy he's thinking of appointing wants my job and will knife me in the back." So I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Will you come and do it?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I will, Col." And the season had already started. And the first meeting I went to, I think, was the May bank holiday. Coventry was struggling. I think they were bottom of the league. I went there, and then I made after a couple, 3 or 4 meetings, I asked Colin to replace one of the riders. For a variety of reasons, that there was something in the background that I didn't think was conducive to a team being successful.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough.
Nothing that nothing dreadful, nothing horrible or dreadful, but it was just something that had I would say you had I'm trying to think of the word. I couldn't say debilitating, but had a detrimental effect on the team. And I wouldn't say what he was, but it is nothing that you would ever imagine.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It wasn't, that he was getting drunk every night, or he was, or thieving from the dressing room or
Yeah,
anything like that. It was a totally. It was something that I'd never ever experienced before. All my years in Speedway with anybody. So we made the change and we managed to avoid finishing bottom, and then obviously we had some successful years then.
Yeah, because I think that sort of time, just as you're saying that, I think it was like maybe 2005. I think round about that sort of time, I think it might have been, because I think Coventry were bottom of the league. They had Scotty in the team then. Bomber was in the team and people like that. And then all of a sudden, I think yourself came and you made a team change. And then all of a sudden, you went from the bottom of the league to finishing fourth in the league to get to the playoffs and then end up winning the league. I think it was that was it might have been the year that, if memory serves me right, I could be completely wrong. Some Coventry fan could probably tell me different, but I think it was around that sort of time where you came from like the bottom of the league, like halfway through to fourth.
I don't think that was the first. I don't think that was the second year, because we had AJ.
Okay.
In the.
Cause I'm thinking of the playoff final between Coventry and Bellevue that year.
That was the first one, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah, I can't remember.
You might be right. Let's say my memory isn't the best on it. But we had had AJ, who was sort of a terrific rider, everywhere, and we then we got a team together for the following season, and we certainly we beat Bellevue, didn't we, in the final. Memory, I think we may even have won at Bellevue.
I think it was, because I think the first leg was at Coventry. I think Crumpy got like a 21-point maximum or something like that, and then you went to Kirky Lane for the second leg, and it was close right down to like the last few races. And then because Coventry had a big sort of 12-point lead or something from the first leg, he managed to sort of hold on to it and win the league at Bellevue. But then I think a couple of years later, I don't think it was the following, I think it was the year after, where you won near enough everything: the cup, the league, the Craven Shield, everything that year, because you had Ollie Allen in the team, and like I said previous, he's been on the show before, and he said that basically you helped him turn a corner in his own career by signing him at Coventry, and I mean, to have an influence like that on someone's career must have felt good to yourself. I mean, obviously, again,
I didn't know that till a few weeks back when Ollie did a thing with Andy Mitchell, the Speedway star, of the gaffer's gaffer.
Oh yes, yeah.
And Ollie talked in there about what an influence I'd had on him. Like I genuinely didn't realise I had such an influence. I knew that that we'd always got on tremendously well. I got on well with his mum. I got on well with his dad, and we were always. He wouldn't so much. I can't tell riders how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
But I can tell them how to live their life and and stuff like that, and guide them on the other side of it. And Ollie always listened. So I knew we had a good relationship, which was developed into a friendship. It was particularly, him and Simon were particularly looked after my grandson. Who's grandson Josh, who travelled with me everywhere, and they really took care of Josh from him being, 97. He was born in 92, so he was only 5 or 6, and they would literally take Josh around on the pre-meeting track walk on their shoulders and stuff like that. And strangely, they became total mates. As they grew up. That when Josh went to university in Sheffield, so saw a lot of Steady up in Sheffield. That he introduced Steady to his wife, who was I think was at uni and was a friend of a friend, and Josh sort of got them together almost, and and with the sort of Ollie, we've always kept in touch. In the earlier days, in the 90s, I arranged for Ollie and Simon to go to Australia with Ivan. And we've always had that, but I didn't know till then that he said that had the influence that I had, because I got to say, I sort of I can't remember whether I messaged him or actually rang up and I said, God, thanks, Ollie. And he said, well, I thought you knew it. I said, no, mate.
No, but obviously to have that sort of thing, like I say, on someone's career, is huge. Even if you didn't know it, like you said, you didn't know it until you read about it in the Speedway Star.
I didn't, and I got a shock when I read. Not so much when I read how much he appreciated the help that he'd got, but even on, like, it developed like, he rang me to talk about whether he should take the GB job and stuff like that, which was nice to know you had an influence. Because again, go back to Ollie, and I always remember from the Thundercats. As you know, when a rider turns 16, he can sign a contract.
Yeah.
And we've all had experiences of looking after a 15-year-old, and then at 16 they go where the money is.
Yeah.
And we offered three of the riders from that 1997 team, Simon, Ollie, and Ross Brady. We offered them a contract to sign professional, but we offered them all the contract we got them a sponsor, and a genuine sponsor, who provided them with, in that case, it was £3,000 worth of sponsorship, and we offered them the same money to ride in the second division, the Premier League, or whatever it was called then. I can always remember I met each of them separately at the pub cum restaurant on the way into the showground.
Okay.
On your right in the showground, and had sort of a meal with them all to talk them hopefully into signing. I always remember that we did the deal with Ollie with Dave, his dad, and as we were walking out, Dave turned round to me and said, if he hadn't offered any money, we'd have still signed. That is another of the little things that always stays in your memory. There are lots of things like that we always had at Peterborough again, we had Ryan Sullivan and Jason Crump.
Yeah.
They're both in the same team, and they were rivals on track. Two Australians who'd come over, both of them making their way. And again, they both wanted to be I'm not going to say the highest paid rider in the team, but they both wanted to make sure that they weren't earning any less than the other.
Oh, okay, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah,
so we did a deal with them both, and we did identical deals. But one night, purely by accident, my daughter, who did all the pay, Sarah, who did the pay, put Jason's wage slip in Ryan's envelope.
Oh dear.
And vice versa. Yeah. And they both opened them and discovered that they were on exactly the same. That was probably that. If we'd have done that deliberately, that would have been the cleverest move we had ever done. Because they both saw that they'd been told the exact truth on money, that they were on identical deals.
Well, they're the sort of things that I personally like to hear, because obviously that's a funny story. Because obviously, the rivals, they want to get one over each other at anything. Whether it was arriving first at this track or leaving first or whatever. They're all in that rivalry. But just to find out they were both on the same wage anyway. Oh, that's brilliant.
Like, they're both of the same standard.
Oh yeah,
it's a logical thing to do. But I guess there are riders whose main concern, and I can probably understand it, is that they are either the highest paid rider in the team, or they're not getting paid less than someone they think is the same standard of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure that applies in every sport. I'm sure there are footballers who will, well, you hear stories, don't you, of a player whose contract has written in that he must be the highest paid.
Yeah.
And if someone suddenly comes and gets 200,000 a week, he's got to be on 201,000 a week.
I know.
And I think that's part of a rider's competitiveness.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, again, I quite think from like Ivan. I think Ivan was like when he was world champion for those 3 years, he had to be first on the plane, had to be first off the plane, first to get his coffee, and things like that. You think, yeah, that is a winning mentality, But then I think sometimes it's a bit sort of over the top, a little bit. But then
that's why they're winners.
True. Very true. Very true.
Because they do that. And again, going back to Ivan's day at Exeter when he joined Exeter from Bellevue, like I helped to negotiate the contract for him, and it included all sorts of clauses. There was the famous one about the plane.
Yes, I heard about that one. Yeah,
that was genuinely in his contract. It was also that he had the rights to his own photographs, being the only ones sold.
Oh, okay.
And they were all taken by Mike Patrick. And Mike Patrick's photographs of Ivan had to be in the shop. And Ivan, got what is now fairly familiar, commonplace in football, those image rights.
Yeah.
We changed part of the colours of the race jacket, so it wasn't all green.
Because obviously they went green and white, didn't they?
Yeah,
and things like that. Oh,
there was a lot more green on it, and it went to a lot less. And there were things like that. But the thing that he never did, when I as team manager, he never ever said, "Oh, I've got to ride at such and such," because I had a spell when in cup matches when I rode him at number 2.
Oh, okay.
And he never ever said to me, "Well, why are you riding at number 2?" I would say to him, "Look, Ivan, I'm going to put you number 2 this week because A, B, and C." Which in those days, the reason was that number 2 rode in Heat 8.
Yes.
So I wanted to protect Heat 8 and know that you've got a chance in Heat 8 away of getting the very, very worst, a 3-3. Whereas normally, it would have been a 5-1 because traditionally people would always put their worst heat leader at number 2. The worst second string. And there were things like that, but I've never ever interfered on the team side, and that was to a large extent that was to his credit. Anyway, back to Peterborough.
Yeah. But no, again, it's just great to hear those sort of like little stories. Again, I've read about them, but to hear it from yourself, to say that these were things like the clauses and all that sort of thing. But going back to Peterborough, obviously, you obviously went to Coventry then, and then you had a little stint with Oxford at the Conference League sort of level with.
That was certainly that. At the time, Alan Trump had got the lease to run Coventry Speedway. Alan and I, go back an awful long time. That he's from Exeter. He lives in Exeter. His business is in Exeter, and we knew each other from the 80s. So, and basically, he rescued Oxford from total closure and just asked me to run it for him, which we did. And easy to say, but we could possibly have still been at Oxford if the landlords had given him a long-term deal. That he wanted a lease of several years, and they were only insisting on 1 year. And he said, "Well, I'm not going to invest in for 1 year what I need to invest in it." So, and strangely, it never ran again, did it? So no one else could get that long-term lease. But Alan walked away from Oxford. He always has a saying, which I'll moderate the language on it, that he was pretty well off, to say rich. And I remember one day saying to Alan, "What does it mean to have so much money, Al?" He said, "The money is just get lost money."
Yeah.
He said, "I can turn down a deal."
Well,
and walk away from a deal because I can afford to turn down the deal and walk away from the deal. And that's one of the sayings that stuck with me, that is the value of being being wealthy, you can say no, whereas mere mortals like myself and probably yourself, sometimes we can't afford to say no.
Exactly. We don't always have a choice, put it
No.
that way. No, but no, it's interesting too because I remember Oxford when you and Alan took it over because I rode for you once. I did a guest booking for you once at
Did you?
reserve.
Yeah.
Yes, I rode. I think it was against Plymouth. I think because Brendan Johnson was at reserve at the time, and I rode. I grew up and rode with him a lot, and he recommended me to either you or Alan to say give him a try for a guest booking. And unfortunately, the meeting that I rode in was one of the wettest nights of the year. Against Plymouth, I think it might have been something like that. I scored a point, but it was like, it was a real eye-opener because obviously the whole club was very, very professional at that level. Because I think you had Jordan Frampton in the team, you had like Lee Smithills, I say Brendan, and people like that. So even though you ran for like a short space of time that year, because obviously you were taking over the Elite League license to run at Conference League level, you still had a competitive team. Even though you.
No, we did. We reached the playoff final, didn't we? Against
yeah. But I think you just missed out on the league title, even though you joined halfway through, sort of thing.
Yeah. Again, that was a good time. That it was good working with and for Alan.
But no, fingers crossed. with all these things that are happening, with Odsall now going ahead for stock cars, and with the talk of Oxford possibly coming back in the future, it's something to hold on to at least for a little while, anyway.
Yeah, you can only hope, can't you, that it does come. It does come off. That's what you want. You want to see more tracks coming back. Like, you'd love to see Rye House come back, wouldn't you? Love to see it come back. Absolutely love to see Coventry come back.
Well, I keep doing the lottery and I don't pick my numbers, so
I don't think it's even down to that, is it?
No, it's not. But it would be nice to have these clubs back. I keep up to date with what Jeff does at Coventry. I think Jeff does a fantastic job with that lot. I just hope that what I've sort of read on social media. You probably might know a bit more than what I do, but hopefully this sort of investor that I've read about, does manage to get what he wants and get the stadium back up and running again, even if it's not just for Speedway, for stock cars and anything else.
I don't, without giving away any sort of confidences or secrets. I think it's been made public knowledge that the potential investor hadn't even had a reply from them.
Oh, okay.
His offer, but like whether that has changed in the last couple of weeks, I don't know.
No.
They don't want to sell it, do they? Full stop.
No, and of course that sort of land then increases in value slowly, doesn't it, over time? And things like that. So
it's land banking, isn't it? Because
exactly
they know that if they sit on it for another 10 years, it'll be worth more at the end of 10 years. And
yeah, well, again, just fingers crossed because we want to hear some more positive about Speedway. Like I said, Bradford going ahead. Just for stock cars for next year or this year now, but with the possibility of 2022 running Speedway, it's all positive. All positive news.
Yeah, I think Bradford has realistic possibilities. I hope Coventry has. The difference is that Bradford Stadium wanted.
Yeah.
And Steve Reith has got the motorsports, leased the motorsports rights, and he wants Speedway in. In addition to his stock cars. So that certainly looks promising. And you wonder if we hadn't have had COVID, whether or not they'd have already been up and running.
Yeah, and whether it would have been at the start of the year or halfway or towards the end, they probably would have put something on there, for some sort of motorsport, and then probably 2021 it would have been Speedway full time, and things like that. But obviously from the old days at Bradford, the big bowl and everything, obviously it's going to have to change slightly because obviously that sort of VIP suite, which is on the third and fourth bend, which is there now, is obviously going to change the track a little bit, so fingers crossed, it'll be a rival to Bellevue now, with them reopening.
Yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope so. But just to round off your promoting days, you went back to Peterborough, and finished off there. Again, was that sort of an out of the blue sort of thing for yourself, or was that a personal sort of choice to go back to Peterborough?
That was a personal choice. I was approached to go back, and I was enthusiastic about it because I lived in Peterborough. It was on my doorstep. Yeah, excuse me. I thought the owners of Peterborough were good people. I told Colin before the end of the season, and told Sandu, and I'd have enjoyed it at Peterborough, but unfortunately, my wife had that's absolutely devastating stroke while having a heart operation, and I had to give it up basically, because we needed to look after her, and she, it happened in August in 2010, and again, the Peterborough promoters, Rick Frost and Julie, they absolutely looked after me. They continued to employ me when I could still do some work, but I certainly couldn't do anything like the amount of work they were expecting of me.
Yeah,
they never put me under the slightest bit of pressure. I offered to stand down as soon as we knew the situation. They said no, just carry on and do what you can. And I basically that was the end of my Speedway promoting days.
Yeah, and then you became again back to being a journalist and going around the tracks. And
I'd never left being a journalist.
Oh no, okay, I take that back. But you know what I mean. You stepped away from the Speedway. You saw you more around the tracks and everything, and talking to everyone. It was, it's a regular thing to see you at the track now.
Yeah. It wasn't really, because since 2010, I've not got around the tracks that much. I've done. I would go to Peterborough every week. I went to Kings Lynn most weeks, because it's only 45-50 minute drive from Peterborough. I would occasionally get somewhere else, but not a lot. I've done far less Speedway, in the last, now it's 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's scary how time's gone quickly now, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'd still do the major meetings, because we had good carers and the family who would stay overnight. So I could go away, but nowhere near as much as I did. Just circumstances, and I still. I'd go to. I don't think I've been to Coventry more than probably a dozen times in the last 10 years. That, but occasionally I'll get out and take a break, and I went to the Isle of Wight, I think, in 2019. Those are still heavily involved. But the great thing these days is that we've all got mobile phones, haven't we? And we've got Facebook, and we got WhatsApp, so you can talk to people a lot more than like one day. At one time, you used to have to go around and see them.
Be face to face. Yeah.
It don't need to be anymore.
No. So I can imagine 2020 has been quite an easier year to get in contact with riders then.
Yeah, because they're not in airports, are they, anymore? No,
very, very true. Very, very true. But I hope Pam and everything and the whole family are all good health, mate, more than anything, especially during this time.
Neil, I think we hope that for everybody, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. But it's been great talking to you tonight, Peter. Hearing the stories and everything, and just seeing another person from Speedway again on the show. Again, a different side of it, because I normally have the riders on. Yeah. But it's great to hear promoters' side of it, and obviously, again, the Ivan stories are brilliant to hear. And things like that.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. That's the main thing. I try to make it as enjoyable as possible. But right, I'll do my plugs and everything, but thank you for everyone for watching. All the previous episodes of the show are on the YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the other podcasts you can find us on. This one will be on, and it'll be a good one, and hopefully everybody can share it, like it, and everything. Just share it around, because it's really good fun talking to Peter. But thank you, Peter, for tonight. And fingers crossed, we'll see you later on in the year at Speedway.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Neil.